I never thought anyone would care," Elsa whispered to the empty square as she sifted through the cracked earth, the dust rising in small clouds around her fingers. May 1945, a small town in Germany. The streets lined with rubble from buildings that once hummed with life, the air thick with the smell of scorched wood and baked clay. The morning sun cut through the haze, spotlighting the fractured landscape, and she moved cautiously, her boots crunching over broken bricks and twisted metal. She paused at a shattered window, eyes scanning for something familiar in the chaos, the sky a muted gray above, heavy with the weight of summer heat. Her hands trembled, not from cold but from hunger and exhaustion, the muscles tight beneath thin clothing that had seen better days. Each step was deliberate, the soles of her shoes catching on splinters, and she swallowed against the bitterness in her throat, trying to remember a time before silence had swallowed her town. A sudden sound made her freeze, the metallic clink of wheels on stone, and she turned toward the street where a jeep emerged from the dust like a moving shadow. The engine hummed, steady, deliberate, its tires kicking up clouds that hung in the air like smoke. From the driver's seat, a man stepped out, John Carter, his uniform crisp despite the heat, boots heavy against the gravel. He paused, scanning the area with calm, steady eyes that missed nothing, yet softened as they landed on her. He moved with care, each step measured, and yet there was an ease in his motion that contrasted with the broken world around them. Elsa held her breath, unsure whether to flee or to stay, her body tense, her heart hammering against her ribs. He reached into his pack, pulling out a small loaf of bread, breaking it carefully in half before extending it toward her. The sun glinted off his helmet, a sharp, warm light that flickered across her pale face. She flinched, instinctively drawing back, suspicion flickering in her gaze, remembering all the stories she had been told, all the warnings whispered through the years of propaganda. The bread hovered between them, a simple gesture carrying a weight she could scarcely comprehend. John ate a small piece himself first, nodding gently, lips moving in a silent cue of trust, and finally Elsa's fingers, hesitant, brushed the warm crust. She tasted it, the rich, earthy texture grounding her in a moment she had not known she could survive. Around them, the street remained quiet except for the faint rustle of debris in the breeze, the distant echo of life returning in fragments. A bird called somewhere unseen, its cry piercing the haze, and Elsa lifted her eyes to meet John's, the briefest flicker of recognition passing between them, unspoken yet understood. Sweat beaded on her forehead, her throat dry, yet she felt a strange warmth, a pulse of reassurance threading through the chaos. The sun climbed higher, painting the rubble in sharp, angled lines, highlighting the stark contrast between ruin and the fragile humanity she had glimpsed in his gesture. She drew in a slow breath, letting it fill her chest, the bread a small anchor against the tide of uncertainty. For the first time in weeks, she felt the stirrings of hope, fragile yet insistent, as the shadow of the war-torn town stretched long across the cracked pavement, and the distant hum of activity hinted that life, in some form, persisted beyond the dust and ruin. The morning air hung thick with the scent of damp earth and sun-baked dust as Elsa Müller carefully navigated the narrow alleyways, her boots brushing over scattered fragments of tile and broken wood. The town seemed suspended in a fragile quiet, only the faint creak of shutters in the breeze reminding her that life persisted, even here. Her hands clutched the small loaf John had given her earlier, warmth still lingering in its crust, a small tether to trust in a world that had grown unpredictable. She moved slowly, eyes scanning the shadows for any movement, though she no longer expected malice, only the uncertain rhythm of survival. Around her, the streets curved and split into familiar paths she remembered from a childhood long before the war had carved scars into every corner. The sun rose higher, streaking through the gaps between ruined buildings, casting long, angular beams across the cracked pavement. The light caught on a pile of rubble, momentarily blinding her, and she blinked, letting the warmth seep into her skin, reminding her that the day had begun anew. She paused at a corner, listening to the distant murmur of voices and the faint clatter of wheels along stone, a sound both foreign and oddly comforting. The town was waking slowly, patchwork of people emerging from hidden corners, their faces lined with fatigue and relief. Elsa shifted the loaf in her hands, breaking off a small piece to nibble, savoring the texture, the faint sweetness, the solid reassurance that food existed beyond the bare scraps she had scavenged. She felt a flicker of strength surge through her, a pulse that demanded movement, demanded action. Her eyes found a narrow pathway leading to the small square where she had first encountered John, the memory of his steady presence and careful, measured actions still vivid. Each step carried the rhythm of cautious optimism, and she felt the faint flutter of anticipation, wondering whether he would appear again, whether the world might allow a moment of normalcy to exist amid the fractured cityscape. Turning the corner, she glimpsed movement at the far end of the square, a figure emerging from the haze of dust and morning sun. John Carter stepped forward, uniform neatly pressed, boots heavy against the stone, yet there was a calmness in his posture, a deliberate gentleness in the way he approached. He carried a small satchel, its contents unknown, yet the gesture of holding it at his side seemed to speak of careful consideration, a silent offer of continued trust. Elsa's breath caught, uncertainty mingling with cautious hope as she stepped into the open, the debris crunching lightly beneath her feet. John's eyes met hers, steady, patient, yet carrying a subtle weight of concern and attention that drew her forward, compelled her to take that first tentative step toward connection. He extended the satchel slowly, gesturing with measured care, a silent question posed across the empty space, an invitation that required neither words nor promise, only the choice to engage. Elsa lifted her hands, hesitating for a heartbeat, then accepted, feeling the texture of the canvas against her fingers, the subtle reassurance of something tangible bridging the gap between fear and trust. Around them, the morning unfolded in gentle rhythm. Sunlight shifted across fractured walls, birds called in distant rooftops, and the town seemed to exhale, granting space for fragile interactions to take root. She followed John through the quiet streets, each step measured, each movement deliberate, the rhythm of their progress mirroring a tentative trust building with every exchanged glance, every shared gesture. As they reached a small clearing where the remnants of a fountain stood, trickle of water still audible, John paused, letting Elsa take the lead, her hands brushing the cracked stone as if confirming the reality of the world around her. She felt a calm she had not known in months, the faint pulse of hope steadying her nerves, guiding her through the lingering uncertainty. Conversation began in careful phrases, the language uneven but earnest, the cadence slow, deliberate, each word weighed with the gravity of survival and the tentative promise of companionship. John listened intently, responses measured, offering explanations, guidance, and the subtle acknowledgement of shared humanity that went far beyond mere civility. The sun climbed higher, casting warm, golden hues across the town, illuminating fragments of the past alongside the present, and in that light, Elsa felt a flicker of clarity, the understanding that trust, once established, could provide the foundation for connection, for a bridge between isolated souls in a fractured world. They moved together through the square, a quiet procession of cautious steps, small gestures, shared glances, the rhythm of their interaction creating a pattern of reassurance that seemed to ripple outward, touching the few bystanders who watched from hidden vantage points. And Elsa felt the beginnings of strength, a readiness to engage with the world beyond the immediate shadows, sustained by the presence of John and the careful, deliberate humanity he offered. Each motion, each look, each exchange formed the scaffold of a relationship built not on declarations or grand gestures, but on measured attention, patient kindness, and the steady acknowledgement of one another's presence and dignity in the still warm morning air. The sun had climbed higher, casting a warm, steady light over the fractured town, and Elsa Müller and John Carter moved slowly along the remnants of the cobbled streets, each step deliberate, measured, filled with an unspoken understanding that every motion mattered in this fragile world. The satchel John carried had shifted slightly against his side, its weight a quiet reminder of purpose and preparation, and he paused often to allow Elsa to adjust her pace, glancing back with a gentle encouragement that did not require words. The buildings that lined their path were skeletal, stripped of their roofs and windows. Yet between the cracks and shadows, hints of former life peeked through, a faded curtain fluttering from a window frame. The curve of a doorway once welcoming, now empty, the scent of damp stone and lingering smoke filling the air. Elsa inhaled deeply, letting the texture of the morning settle into her lungs. The warmth of the sun on her shoulders, a subtle reassurance that the world had not entirely abandoned her. They reached the edge of the square, where a small fountain, dry and fractured, marked the center, and John set the satchel down on the sun-warmed stones, letting Elsa examine its contents without hurry. Inside, small parcels of food, a tin cup, and a folded blanket were arranged with careful thought, each item a tangible expression of care and attention that words alone could not convey. She touched the blanket, the coarse fibers soft under her fingers, and felt a faint pulse of normalcy in the midst of devastation. John stood nearby, eyes scanning the street, alert but calm, the quiet confidence of his presence offering a kind of anchor to Elsa, who had grown accustomed to uncertainty. As she explored the satchel, he moved to the fountain, kneeling slightly to inspect the cracked stone, lifting small fragments of debris with meticulous care, an echo of his attentiveness to the world around them and to her well-being. The air was still, punctuated only by the occasional bird call or the distant shuffle of debris being moved by unseen hands, and the warmth of the sun deepened, illuminating textures, shadows, and the subtle interplay of light across fractured walls. Elsa felt the first stirrings of a rhythm, a cadence to their interaction, each glance, each small gesture building a bridge of trust between them, fragile yet enduring. She picked up the tin cup, feeling its weight, imagining water carried to it, imagining nourishment, and John watched her with a patience that seemed endless, his posture relaxed yet intent, a careful balance of vigilance and compassion. They began to move again, circling the square, passing under the skeletal remains of archways and through narrow alleys. Each step a negotiation with the memory of what had been and the uncertain promise of what might come. Conversation started to take shape, halting at first, careful phrasing, deliberate words, but each phrase a small thread weaving connection and understanding. John pointed out landmarks, remnants of the past that Elsa had known, speaking slowly, articulating names and functions, and she responded with nods, gestures, and a few broken phrases of her own, the dialogue a tapestry of effort, patience, and emerging familiarity. As they paused near the fountain, Elsa knelt to inspect a small plant pushing through a crack in the stone, its green leaves stark against the gray, and John crouched beside her, nodding subtly, a shared acknowledgement of resilience and life persisting despite hardship. The afternoon sun deepened, casting long shadows, and Elsa felt a growing steadiness, the first tangible sense that the world might hold space for hope and mutual understanding. John offered guidance on navigating the streets, pointing out safe paths, shaded areas, and spots where debris might shift, all the while maintaining a careful distance that allowed Elsa autonomy and choice. They continued to move together, a quiet partnership forming with each deliberate step, a rhythm that was at once cautious and tentative, yet undeniably present. By mid-afternoon, they reached the edge of the town, where open fields began to stretch toward the horizon, the land undulating gently, sun-warmed and inviting, a subtle contrast to the rubble left behind. Elsa paused, taking in the expanse, the faint breeze carrying scents of grass, earth, and distant flowers, and John waited, giving her time to orient herself, to breathe in the vastness of possibility. In that moment, a quiet understanding settled between them, the bridge of trust strengthening, the possibility of collaboration and mutual care extending beyond the immediate, fractured environment. Each small step, each exchanged glance, each silent acknowledgement built upon the last. The rhythm of their interaction, a careful choreography of attention, patience, and emerging connection, the sun casting warmth over their faces, illuminating the tentative yet profound thread of humanity growing between two people navigating the remnants of a world that had been irrevocably changed. The sun began its slow descent, casting long, warm rays across the open fields at the edge of town, the light stretching over the undulating terrain like a soft blanket. Elsa Müller and John Carter continued their careful navigation along the worn paths, the debris of the town behind them and the promise of open space ahead. Every step carried a rhythm, a cadence of measured attention, as Elsa adjusted to the wider expanse, her movements no longer tentative but still deliberate, each footfall anchoring her in the present. The wind carried faint scents of grass and earth, the subtle aroma of early blooms mingling with the warmth of the afternoon sun, and she inhaled deeply, letting the simple richness of life fill her lungs. John walked beside her, maintaining a respectful distance, his posture relaxed but attentive, eyes scanning for uneven ground or hidden obstacles, the careful diligence of someone who had learned to move with purpose in uncertain terrain. He gestured toward a small grove of trees in the distance, their leaves rustling gently, and Elsa followed the motion with her eyes, noting the shade it promised and the quiet refuge it offered from the glare of the sun. They approached the trees, stepping over patches of uneven soil and loose stones, the crunch of debris underfoot the only sound breaking the stillness of the fields. Elsa reached the grove first, placing her hand against the rough bark of a towering oak, feeling the strength of the living wood beneath her fingers, a tactile reassurance that some things remained steadfast despite the upheaval around them. John settled nearby, kneeling to examine a cluster of wildflowers pushing through the earth, nodding subtly, as if acknowledging the resilience of life persisting against odds. The silence between them was comfortable, punctuated only by the soft sigh of wind through leaves and the distant calls of birds, a quiet soundtrack to their measured movements. Elsa unwrapped a small piece of bread from the satchel, savoring its warmth, and John offered her a sip from his canteen, the cool water sliding down her throat, grounding her further in the sensation of trust and shared space. They spoke sparingly, words carefully chosen, each phrase deliberate, measured, yet imbued with significance, a quiet exchange that carried more meaning than mere sentences. John described the layout of the surrounding fields, pointing out paths that led safely around rough terrain, while Elsa listened intently, nodding and occasionally asking questions, the dialogue a tentative bridge connecting their perspectives and fostering a sense of cooperative rhythm. Time seemed to stretch, each moment filled with the gentle unfolding of awareness, observation, and cautious engagement, a dance of attention and response that allowed them both to inhabit the present fully. The sun dipped lower, casting a golden glow that deepened shadows and accentuated textures across the landscape, and Elsa felt a subtle pulse of optimism, a quiet acknowledgement that human connection, even small and fragile, could provide a grounding force amidst uncertainty. They paused near a shallow stream, the water clear and reflecting the warm hues of late afternoon, and Elsa knelt to trace her fingers through the cool flow, the sensation crisp against the warmth of her hands. John remained at a short distance, offering space while keeping vigilant watch, his presence a steadying constant. The flow of the water, the rustle of leaves, the warmth of the sunlight, and the quiet attentiveness between them formed a tapestry of reassurance and tentative hope. As they continued to move along the stream, they shared small gestures, a pointed finger indicating a smooth rock to step on, a gentle nod, a glance that acknowledged care and attentiveness. Each motion reinforced trust, patience, and mutual understanding, a silent language that transcended words. Shadows lengthened, the afternoon slowly giving way to the soft warmth of early evening, and the town beyond remained quiet, the distant outline of rooftops silhouetted against the golden horizon. Elsa felt a growing sense of stability, a quiet pulse of confidence, as each careful step, each exchanged look, and each deliberate gesture strengthened the fragile bridge between past fear and present trust, the rhythm of their interaction echoing with the quiet persistence of human connection in a world slowly recovering from upheaval. The sky shifted subtly as the afternoon began to wane, painting the open fields in muted gold and amber, the light brushing across the tops of the tall grasses and highlighting the contours of distant hills. Elsa Müller moved carefully beside John Carter, each step deliberate, her senses alert to the rhythm of the land around them, the gentle rustle of leaves, the distant murmur of a small creek threading through the terrain. The warmth of the day still lingered, seeping into her clothes and skin, grounding her in the moment, and she felt a faint steadiness growing within her chest, a pulse of confidence she had not known in weeks. John walked a few paces ahead, turning back occasionally to offer a nod or a small hand gesture, guiding her attention to safe footing or pointing out subtle changes in the path that might cause imbalance. His movements were fluid and purposeful, yet unhurried, the cadence of his steps echoing a steady rhythm that seemed to anchor her, the quiet steadiness of his presence a subtle reassurance against lingering uncertainty. Elsa glanced down at the uneven ground, her eyes tracing patterns in the soil and scattered stones, then lifted them to the horizon where the field spread endlessly, a soft haze diffusing the sunlight, creating a sense of gentle expansiveness. She inhaled the warm, dry air, letting it fill her lungs, the scent of earth and growing vegetation grounding her in the world around her, a tactile reminder that life persisted beyond the rubble of the town. They approached a shallow depression where wildflowers had taken root, colors muted yet persistent, and Elsa crouched to examine them, brushing the petals gently with her fingertips, the softness a small comfort in contrast to the hard textures surrounding her. John knelt beside her, examining a cluster of delicate white blooms, his gloved hands careful, deliberate, mirroring her attention, the shared focus creating a quiet synchronization between them. The sun dipped lower, casting elongated shadows across the fields, and the light shifted from the bright, sharp warmth of midday to a softer, golden glow that seemed to wrap the landscape in a protective warmth. Elsa felt a subtle pulse of calm, her shoulders easing, her breath slowing, and the tension that had gripped her through months of uncertainty began to loosen incrementally. They rose and continued along the path, their movements measured, the occasional glance exchanged carrying more significance than words could convey, a silent affirmation of trust and shared awareness. A gentle breeze stirred the grasses, lifting strands and carrying them across the field, the movement catching in the fading light, creating patterns that danced across their feet, and Elsa followed the motion with her eyes, finding comfort in the simplicity of observation. John pointed out a low-lying cluster of trees in the distance, their shade a welcome respite from the lingering warmth, and Elsa nodded, understanding the subtle invitation to pause and rest. They reached the grove, stepping carefully over exposed roots and small rocks, and Elsa allowed herself a moment to sit upon the sun-warmed earth, the texture grounding her, while John settled nearby, attentive yet giving her space to recover. Conversation emerged slowly, carefully, measured phrases exchanged, each word deliberate, chosen for clarity and simplicity, building connection through attention and patience rather than speed or volume. John shared observations of the surrounding fields, noting landmarks and subtle shifts in terrain, while Elsa responded with nods and soft questions, her words tentative but growing in confidence as she acclimated to both the physical space and the rhythm of their shared movement. They moved again, slowly weaving through the grove, each step deliberate, each gesture considered, the cadence of their interaction becoming a quiet ritual of trust and shared awareness. The afternoon light shifting continuously to illuminate textures, colors, and the subtle interplay of shadow and warmth. The stream that meandered through the grove offered a small, glistening reflection of the sky above, and Elsa knelt to trace her fingers through the shallow water, the cool touch a contrast to the lingering warmth of the sun, grounding her further in the present. John observed silently, maintaining careful vigilance while allowing Elsa autonomy, his posture relaxed yet attentive, a balance of presence and consideration that encouraged her quiet confidence. The late afternoon unfolded in a gentle rhythm, each motion, each glance, and each silent acknowledgement reinforcing trust, patience, and mutual understanding, the natural world around them echoing with the quiet persistence of life, a reminder that even in a world shaped by uncertainty, moments of calm, care, and connection could exist and endure. The sun dipped lower, casting a soft amber glow across the fields, the long shadows stretching over uneven ground, and Elsa Müller walked beside John Carter, the rhythm of their steps a quiet measure of growing familiarity and trust. The air was warm but carried a gentle crispness that hinted at the approaching evening, the faint scent of wildflowers blending with the earth and dust, creating a subtle perfume that seemed almost ordinary after weeks of disarray. Elsa paused to adjust her clothing, the fabric light against her skin, and glanced around at the sweeping landscape, noting the gentle roll of the hills and the subtle sparkle of a distant stream catching the sun's last rays. John slowed to match her pace, his eyes sweeping the horizon, not out of suspicion but awareness, the careful attentiveness of someone who understood the importance of presence without intrusion. They reached a shallow grove where the light filtered through the leaves, dappling the ground in shifting patterns of gold and green, and Elsa knelt to touch the moss growing between stones, feeling its softness, a quiet reminder of life persisting against the odds. John remained a few steps behind, his posture relaxed, hands resting lightly at his sides, giving her space while signaling with subtle nods that he was present, attentive, and patient. A faint breeze stirred the leaves above, carrying with it the quiet hum of insects and the distant trill of a bird, sounds that seemed almost musical after the silence that had filled her days. Elsa rose and continued walking, each step deliberate, the subtle sound of her boots against the uneven terrain blending with the ambient chorus of the grove. They moved toward a small rise overlooking a patchwork of fields and ruined buildings, the sun now low, brushing the scene with a warm, golden edge. Elsa's eyes followed the lines of shadow and light, the subtle textures of the earth, and she felt a measure of calm settle in her chest, the rhythm of the landscape echoing the slow, deliberate cadence of her own breath. John gestured toward the open fields ahead, a silent invitation to continue, and she followed, her steps careful yet assured, each motion a negotiation between caution and curiosity. As they descended a gentle slope, they came upon a narrow path lined with wild grasses bending under the light breeze, and Elsa brushed her hand along the stalks, the tactile sensation grounding her in the present. John kept a steady pace, occasionally glancing at her, noting the subtle shifts in her posture, the way her gaze tracked the horizon, a silent acknowledgement of her awareness and attentiveness. The path opened onto a wider stretch of land, the lights softening as the sun edged closer to the horizon, painting the scene in hues of amber and soft rose, shadows deepening yet gentle, creating a canvas of subtle contrasts and textures. Elsa breathed in deeply, the warm air filling her lungs, carrying scents of earth, grass, and distant blossoms, and felt a subtle pulse of optimism, a quiet recognition that the day had offered a space for reflection, observation, and cautious connection. They paused near a gentle bend in the path where a small cluster of rocks formed a natural seat, and Elsa lowered herself carefully, the cool surface a comfort against the warmth of the day, while John stood nearby, scanning the area with measured attention, allowing her the space to rest while maintaining quiet vigilance. The light continued to shift, casting long shadows that mingled with the golden glow, and the quiet between them was filled with subtle exchanges, a glance, a nod, a shared observation of a bird landing on a distant branch, all forming a delicate rhythm of trust and awareness. Elsa traced a finger along the contours of a stone, feeling the roughness, the coolness, and the subtle warmth that had soaked in from the sun, a reminder that texture and sensation could anchor her in the present. John spoke softly, careful words about the land, its features, the safest paths forward, his voice low and deliberate, each sentence measured for clarity and calm, reinforcing the sense of steady companionship. As they rose to continue along the path, the sun dipped further, the warm amber deepening into richer hues, and Elsa felt a quiet sense of continuity, a pulse of reassurance carried in the deliberate, attentive, and synchronized steps they shared across the fields, the rhythm of their movement and interaction echoing the quiet persistence of connection, trust, and humanity in a world slowly recovering from chaos. The evening air cooled as the sun slipped closer to the horizon, painting the fields in soft shades of amber and muted rose, the light scattering across the tall grasses and undulating earth in patterns that shifted with every passing moment. Elsa Müller and John Carter continued their careful progress along a narrow trail, the landscape opening before them into a patchwork of shadows and golden highlights. Each step was deliberate, measured, the rhythm of their movement harmonizing with the subtle pulse of the world around them. Elsa paused to observe a small cluster of wildflowers, the petals illuminated by the fading sunlight, and she bent slightly to brush her fingers along the delicate stems, noting the gentle resilience of life persisting against the backdrop of ruined structures beyond the fields. John remained a few paces behind, attentive without intruding, his eyes sweeping the path ahead while allowing Elsa the space to engage with the environment at her own pace. The warmth of the day lingered on their shoulders, mingling with the cool hints of the approaching night, creating a balanced tension of comfort and awareness. Elsa lifted her gaze to the distant line of trees at the edge of the fields, their leaves rustling softly, the shadows stretching long across the terrain. John gestured toward a shallow incline where the sunlight caught on stones and patches of dry earth, a subtle indication of the safest passage forward, and Elsa nodded, following his suggestion with careful, deliberate steps. They moved in tandem through the shifting light, the subtle cadence of their interaction, a glance, a gesture, a shared awareness, forming a quiet rhythm that strengthened the sense of trust between them. The soft murmur of a stream echoed from a nearby ravine, water glinting faintly as it caught the last rays of the sun, and Elsa paused briefly, letting the sound anchor her attention, the flowing water a gentle contrast to the warm, still air surrounding them. John crouched near her side, pointing out the contours of the terrain, indicating areas to step lightly and places to pause, each instruction delivered with careful calm, reinforcing her growing sense of confidence and attentiveness. Shadows lengthened, deepening the textures of the field, the interplay of light and dark creating a tapestry that mirrored the delicate balance of their shared movement and interaction. Elsa adjusted her pace, the warmth of the sun on her face fading into a gentle glow, and she felt a subtle surge of clarity and composure, the rhythm of each step in sync with the deliberate, attentive guidance of John. The trail curved slightly, leading them past a stone wall partially overgrown with ivy, its rough surface softened by the diffused light, and Elsa traced her fingers along the uneven stone as if grounding herself, while John stood nearby, observing with steady, patient vigilance. A gentle breeze shifted the grasses at their feet, carrying scents of earth, water, and distant wildflowers, mingling with the warmth of the fading day, and she inhaled deeply, feeling the moment settle into her senses, the quiet interplay of environment and shared movement creating a fragile, yet palpable, sense of stability. They approached a clearing where the open fields met a line of tall trees, the light casting long shadows that stretched across the earth, and Elsa paused to take in the expanse, feeling the balance between exposure and shelter, openness and care. John remained close enough to offer guidance, far enough to allow autonomy, a subtle rhythm of companionship and attention developing between them. They moved forward slowly, deliberate, careful, the cadence of footsteps, glances, and quiet gestures forming a synchronized pattern of awareness and trust. The sun descended further, softening its light to a muted golden hue, the world around them steeped in a quiet stillness, and Elsa felt the growing pulse of confidence and connection, the shared presence with John providing a tangible thread of reassurance. Each motion, each subtle interaction, each deliberate choice to move with care and attention deepened the sense of partnership between them, the rhythm of their shared journey through the landscape echoing with the quiet persistence of trust, awareness, and emerging hope in a world slowly regaining equilibrium. The sky deepened into soft shades of coral and gold, the sun low enough to cast long, stretching shadows across the open fields, and Elsa Müller moved beside John Carter with careful, deliberate steps, the gentle rhythm of their walking forming a quiet dialogue between movement and attention. The air was warm but carried the subtle chill of evening, the faint scent of wildflowers mingling with dry earth, the gentle hum of insects rising from the grass as day began its slow descent into night. Elsa's fingers brushed the tops of the tall grasses lining the path, the sensation grounding her, each stroke a tactile connection to the living world around her, while her eyes traced the interplay of light and shadow across the undulating terrain, noting the subtle changes in color and texture with a quiet appreciation. John remained a few paces behind, alert yet unintrusive, his eyes scanning the path ahead and the surroundings, occasionally gesturing with a slight nod to indicate safe footing or to point out subtle landmarks that might assist her in navigating the terrain. The trail curved gently, leading them toward a small copse of trees where the last light of the sun filtered through the leaves, casting dappled patterns across the ground. And Elsa slowed to absorb the warmth and color, feeling the quiet reassurance of the environment settle around her. She knelt briefly to touch a small cluster of wildflowers peeking through a patch of sun-warmed soil, their delicate petals reflecting the soft golden light, and John crouched nearby, his presence steady, patient, an unspoken signal that she was safe to engage with the world in her own time and manner. The wind carried faint sounds of distant wildlife, the soft rustle of leaves above, and the gentle trickle of a nearby stream, each sound layering the scene with subtle depth, a quiet symphony of presence and persistence. Elsa rose slowly, following the slight incline of the path, her steps measured, mindful of loose stones and the uneven ground beneath her feet, and she felt a quiet rhythm establishing itself between her movements and John's attentive guidance. Their conversation remained sparse, deliberate, each word carefully chosen, the cadence of speech mirroring the thoughtful pace of their shared exploration, reinforcing a sense of mutual awareness and trust that grew steadily with each passing moment. As they reached the crest of a gentle rise, the view opened onto the fields beyond, bathed in the warm, fading light, shadows lengthening across the terrain and accentuating the contours of the earth. Elsa paused to take in the expanse, the subtle shimmer of water in the distant stream catching the light, a calm pulse of presence grounding her in the immediacy of observation and sensation. John adjusted his pace to stand beside her, maintaining a quiet, respectful distance, his attention not intrusive but vigilant, a presence that offered reassurance without imposing, allowing the moment to breathe with unspoken understanding. They continued along the rise, moving toward a small grove at the edge of the fields where light and shadow played across rough bark and soft moss. And Elsa felt a deepening awareness of the textures, colors, and subtle movements of the living landscape around her, each detail anchoring her further in the present. John pointed out small features, stones, shallow dips in the earth, the gentle slope of the terrain, guiding her attention with measured gestures, the rhythm of his movements echoing the deliberate cadence of their walk and reinforcing a subtle, quiet pattern of cooperation and connection. The sun dipped lower, casting a warm glow across their path and lengthening shadows into soft, golden trails that stretched across grasses and earth, and Elsa felt a steady pulse of calm confidence, a subtle reassurance woven from movement, observation, and the presence of another who watched carefully without intrusion. They paused at a narrow bend in the path where a small outcropping of rock offered a natural vantage point, Elsa resting her hands lightly against the stone, feeling its texture, the warmth of the sun lingering on its surface, while John observed silently, attentive to both her and the surroundings, maintaining a balance of vigilance and space. The light continued to shift, the landscape deepening into rich, warm tones, and the quiet exchange of glances, gestures, and careful steps reinforced a fragile yet enduring rhythm of trust, presence, and shared awareness. Each moment, each movement, each subtle acknowledgement of attention and care created a silent, resonant thread of connection that strengthened steadily with every measured step across the fields, the gentle evening light wrapping the landscape, and the two of them in a soft, sustaining embrace of calm and continuity. The sky had deepened to a soft, dusky purple, the last traces of sunlight casting long, slender shadows across the rolling fields as Elsa Müller and John Carter continued their careful progression along the narrow, winding path. The air carried a gentle coolness, brushing softly against their skin and carrying the faint, earthy aroma of grass and soil warmed by the day, mingling with the subtle sweetness of late-blooming wildflowers. Elsa moved with measured steps, her attention drawn to the subtle textures of the ground beneath her feet, the small stones, and the tender blades of grass brushing against her shoes, each sensation anchoring her in the present, steadying her with quiet reassurance. John followed closely, attentive yet unobtrusive, his posture relaxed, the careful alignment of his steps echoing a rhythm that matched her own, creating an unspoken harmony in their movement. As they approached a gentle rise, the field opened to reveal a broader expanse, the view stretching toward the distant tree line, where the sun's final glow kissed the tops of the tallest oaks and maples, their leaves trembling in the soft evening breeze. Elsa paused, tilting her head to catch the warm light on the subtle undulations of the land, the gentle interplay of shadow and gold creating a visual symphony that seemed almost designed to calm the senses and lift the spirit. She knelt briefly to examine a patch of ground where tiny, resilient flowers had pushed through the dry soil, their delicate petals catching the fading light, and she traced the outlines with her fingertips, feeling the slight resistance of the earth beneath her touch. John crouched nearby, careful to keep a respectful distance, his gaze sweeping the landscape, observing and guiding, yet never intruding, offering a sense of quiet security through his measured attentiveness. The path ahead narrowed slightly, bordered by taller grasses swaying in the breeze, and Elsa adjusted her steps to accommodate the uneven ground, her movements precise, deliberate, filled with a cautious confidence that had been slowly growing with each shared moment. The distant trickle of water from a hidden stream provided a faint, soothing soundtrack, punctuating the soft rustle of leaves and the whisper of wind through the grasses, weaving a delicate rhythm around them. As they moved forward, their conversation was minimal but deliberate, each word chosen with care, speaking more to observation and shared attention than to urgency or instruction, the cadence of their speech blending seamlessly with the pace of their steps. John gestured subtly toward a low-lying incline, indicating the safest approach, and Elsa responded with a nod, her eyes scanning the terrain with increasing assurance, her awareness attuned to both the environment and the quiet guidance he offered. The long shadows of evening stretched over the fields, casting rich, soft lines across the earth, highlighting the textures of soil, stone, and grass in a way that drew Elsa's attention to the small, often overlooked details of the landscape, each step a tactile and visual meditation. The light continued to fade, deepening into a richer gold as the sun neared the horizon, and the grove of trees ahead offered a soft, welcoming shadow where they could pause, a natural sanctuary from the open fields. Elsa and John reached the grove, stepping carefully over exposed roots and scattered stones, the rhythm of their movement calm and deliberate, the interaction between them a silent, steady communication of trust and attention. They paused at the edge, both observing the gentle sway of the treetops and the subtle shifts in light, the world around them imbued with a quiet stillness that reflected the steadying cadence of their journey. Each subtle glance, each careful gesture, and each measured step reinforced the emerging sense of connection and understanding, the rhythm of their shared movement and presence forming an invisible but tangible bond, a quiet testament to patience, attentiveness, and the human capacity to find trust and reassurance even amidst a world marked by change and uncertainty. The soft purple of the evening sky deepened further, the temperature cooling gently, and Elsa felt a profound sense of continuity. The steady presence of John and the measured rhythm of their journey through the fields creating a calm and enduring foundation for the fragile thread of trust and companionship that had grown steadily between them. The horizon glowed with the last warm tones of sunlight, stretching the shadows of the trees across the gently rolling fields, and Elsa Müller adjusted her pace to match the subtle incline of the path, the cool evening air brushing softly against her skin while carrying the scent of earth, grass, and faint wildflowers from the surrounding landscape. Each step was deliberate, careful, measured with attention to the uneven ground and the occasional stones scattered across the worn trail, and she felt the rhythm of movement grounding her in the present, a steadying pulse against the lingering uncertainty of the day. John Carter walked beside her, keeping a respectful distance yet close enough that his presence offered quiet reassurance, his posture relaxed, hands resting lightly at his sides, eyes attentive to both her and the terrain ahead. The light shifted as the sun dipped lower, casting a gentle golden glow across the fields, illuminating textures and contours that had previously been hidden in shadow, and Elsa paused to take in the subtle beauty of the moment, the gentle play of color and form offering a sense of calm. She knelt briefly to touch the tops of tall grasses swaying in the soft breeze, tracing the lines of blades between her fingers, the tactile sensation connecting her more deeply to the living world around her, while John crouched nearby, his attention quiet but purposeful, guiding with subtle gestures when necessary. They moved on, stepping carefully over exposed roots and small rocks, the quiet cadence of their movement mirroring the gentle rhythm of the evening. Each step a shared acknowledgement of trust and attentiveness. Elsa looked toward the distant line of trees where the lights softened to muted gold, imagining the cool shade they would offer, a natural pause from the open warmth of the fields, and she felt a small surge of anticipation, a quiet curiosity about what lay just beyond the next rise. John indicated a shallow incline with a nod, and she adjusted her steps accordingly, the awareness of his guidance reinforcing the steadying sense of confidence growing within her. As they continued, the wind carried faint rustles from the underbrush and distant birds calling softly to one another, the natural symphony a soothing backdrop to their deliberate progress, each sound subtly marking the passage of time and movement. The path widened slightly, revealing small wildflowers pushing through cracks in the earth, their muted colors catching the fading light, and Elsa paused to kneel and gently touch the petals, appreciating their quiet resilience, the simple beauty a reminder of persistence amidst change. John remained nearby, observing silently, his presence steadying, allowing her to take her time, and the space between them created a rhythm that balanced attention with autonomy, fostering trust without intrusion. The sun continued to descend, deepening the amber and rose tones of the horizon, the interplay of light and shadow casting intricate patterns across the gently undulating fields, and Elsa felt a profound sense of calm, the measured steps, glances, and gestures between them creating a subtle harmony that resonated with the quiet evening. They reached a small clearing where the path dipped gently, leading to a line of low-lying rocks offering a natural resting point, and Elsa lowered herself to examine the textures of the stones, feeling the cool, sun-warmed surfaces beneath her hands while John stood nearby, scanning the surroundings with patient vigilance, the silent partnership between them reinforcing a shared understanding and awareness. The ambient sounds of water trickling from a distant stream, whined through the grasses, and the faint movement of leaves overhead wove a gentle rhythm around their paws, creating a space for reflection and observation. Rising once more, they moved forward slowly, the remaining light casting long, soft shadows and warm highlights that accentuated the depth and contours of the landscape, each step deliberate, each movement an echo of the steady, quiet partnership forming between them. The approach to the grove at the edge of the fields brought a sense of subtle anticipation, the last light illuminating the path, the trees offering both shade and a visual anchor, and Elsa felt the connection between them deepen, the steady, attentive presence of John fostering a sense of continuity, trust, and calm that carried forward with every careful step across the fields. The soft glow of evening wrapping the landscape and their shared journey in a gentle, enduring embrace of quiet, reassurance, and mutual awareness. The sky had deepened into a soft twilight, the last light of the day casting muted gold and pale violet across the fields, and Elsa Müller walked beside John Carter, the gentle rhythm of their steps forming a quiet dialogue with the evening air. The warmth of the day had softened, leaving a comfortable coolness that brushed against their skin, carrying with it the subtle scent of wild grasses and distant flowers, mingling with the earthy aroma of soil warmed by the sun. Elsa moved with careful deliberation, her attention drawn to the textures underfoot, small stones, and uneven patches of ground, each step grounding her in the present while reinforcing a growing sense of calm. John maintained a steady pace beside her, close enough to offer support, distant enough to allow her autonomy, his eyes scanning the surroundings with a measured vigilance, his posture relaxed yet purposeful. They approached a gentle rise, the landscape opening before them to reveal the distant outline of the town behind and the expanse of fields stretching toward the horizon, bathed in the soft glow of twilight. Elsa paused for a moment, letting the last light brush across her face, the subtle colors illuminating the contours of the terrain, the interplay of shadow and warm tones offering both visual comfort and a sense of spatial orientation. She crouched briefly to examine a patch of ground where delicate flowers had taken root, their muted petals reflecting the waning light, and she traced their outlines with careful fingers, noting the quiet resilience of life amidst the remnants of destruction. John crouched nearby, attentive yet unintrusive, his presence steady and reassuring, the careful synchronization of their movement fostering a subtle rhythm of trust. The wind stirred faintly through the grasses, carrying the soft hum of insects and distant bird calls, creating an ambient backdrop to their deliberate steps and exchanged glances. Elsa rose and continued along the path, adjusting her movements to accommodate the gentle undulations of the land, the cadence of their steps harmonizing with the natural rhythm of the evening. They approached a small grove of trees at the edge of a field, the foliage casting long, soft shadows across the path, offering both shade and a visual anchor as the twilight deepened. John indicated a small clearing ahead, and Elsa followed, feeling a gentle anticipation, a quiet curiosity about what the space might hold. The soft murmur of a stream nearby added a gentle undertone to the natural soundscape, the flow of water reflecting faint traces of twilight light, and Elsa knelt to touch the cool surface, the sensation grounding her in the present while creating a moment of quiet reflection. John observed silently, his presence steady, allowing her time to explore, the subtle interplay of gestures, glances, and movement forming an unspoken language of awareness and mutual attentiveness. The path widened, revealing areas where the long grasses bent beneath the wind, and Elsa stepped carefully, her focus balancing attention to terrain with awareness of the surrounding space. John offered small indications of direction, subtle gestures pointing out slight inclines or safe footing, reinforcing a delicate sense of security and shared understanding. The ambient light softened further, the sky deepening into shades of lavender and dusky blue, shadows stretching across the fields, and Elsa felt a growing sense of continuity, the presence of John and the rhythm of their measured steps reinforcing a steadying pulse of trust and calm. They paused near a slight rise, the horizon opening in front of them, and Elsa took in the expanse, noting the patterns of light and shadow, the gentle movement of grasses and the distant treeline, allowing the breadth of the landscape to instill a quiet sense of reassurance. John stood nearby, silent but attentive, maintaining balance between vigilance and patience, his presence reinforcing the careful, deliberate connection forming between them. They moved slowly, deliberately, each step, glance, and subtle gesture deepening the thread of trust, each moment a careful building block of awareness, companionship, and mutual understanding. The twilight deepened, the soft interplay of warm and cool tones across the terrain creating a visual rhythm that echoed the measured cadence of their shared journey, and Elsa felt a quiet pulse of hope and grounding, a gentle affirmation that in the steady, attentive presence of another, even amidst uncertainty, the world could offer continuity, connection, and enduring reassurance. The horizon had shifted to deep violet, the last traces of sunlight melting into the gentle embrace of twilight, and Elsa Müller moved carefully beside John Carter, each step deliberate, measured, harmonizing with the subtle rhythm of the evening air. The temperature had dropped slightly, bringing a cool freshness that brushed lightly against her skin, mingling with the lingering warmth of the earth beneath their feet, the faint scent of grass, soil, and distant wildflowers creating a quiet, grounding presence. Elsa's eyes traced the subtle textures of the terrain, noting the way shadows stretched across the gentle undulations of the fields, the muted interplay of color and form grounding her awareness in each measured step. John followed at a steady pace, maintaining a balance between attentive vigilance and respectful distance, his movements calm and deliberate, a quiet presence reinforcing both safety and the fragile rhythm of trust that had developed between them. They reached a shallow incline where the trail curved around a small stand of trees, the leaves rustling softly in the breeze, casting intricate patterns of shadow across the ground. Elsa paused to inhale deeply, letting the cool evening air fill her lungs, and her fingers brushed along the tops of tall grasses, tracing the subtle contours of each blade as a tactile affirmation of presence and grounding. John crouched slightly, indicating a clear path through the uneven terrain, his subtle gestures guiding without intrusion, the silent synchronization of their steps reinforcing the careful interplay of autonomy and shared awareness. The distant murmuring of a stream provided a faint, calming background, its water catching the fading light in subtle sparkles, the gentle flow echoing the measured cadence of their footsteps and glances. Elsa followed the contour of the path, stepping lightly over scattered stones and shallow depressions, her attention heightened by the textures beneath her feet and the interplay of shadow and light around them. John pointed out subtle features, exposed roots, smooth patches, and soft ground, his gestures deliberate, unobtrusive, and precise, reinforcing her growing sense of confidence and stability. The sky deepened further into twilight, streaks of soft rose and muted gold blending with the encroaching purples, shadows lengthening and forming patterns across the fields that accentuated the gentle rise and fall of the terrain. Elsa felt a quiet pulse of reassurance, each step forward a small victory in her growing awareness and trust, the cadence of movement forming a shared rhythm with John that spoke more profoundly than words could convey. They approached a small grove near the top of the incline, where the trees formed a natural shelter, and Elsa knelt to touch the cool moss on a stone, noting the texture, temperature, and subtle resilience of the living material under her fingertips, the sensation a quiet affirmation of continuity and presence. John remained standing slightly behind, observing the surrounding area with calm vigilance, yet giving her the space to engage fully with the environment, the balance of attention and autonomy creating a subtle, unspoken dialogue of trust. As they moved further into the grove, the lights softened into deep, warm hues, the interplay of shadows and fading sun creating intricate patterns across the ground, and Elsa felt a deepening sense of calm, the steady presence of John, and the shared rhythm of careful, deliberate steps forming an enduring thread of companionship. The gentle sway of leaves in the evening breeze, the soft trickle of water from the stream, and the distant calls of birds interwove to create a soothing soundscape, echoing the quiet interplay of their interaction. Each gesture, glance, and deliberate motion reinforced the fragile yet growing bond of trust and attentiveness, the shared awareness a testament to the quiet strength of human connection and resilience. They continued forward, their movements slow, deliberate, and synchronized, each step a reflection of measured care and mutual attentiveness, the twilight wrapping the fields and the two of them in a soft, enveloping calm that carried the rhythm of reassurance, patience, and emerging confidence through the gentle expanse of the evening landscape.